Well, they keep telling us this digital ID is all for convenience. It's all to improve our lives, but is something darker, more nefarious going on? Will we be able to go to our bank without this digital ID? Will we be able to live our lives without a digital ID? Is it all about control? And where is this coming from? Where did this emerge from? My bet is some unelected globalists, but we'll get to the bottom of all of that today on the show. I'm lucky to be joined by Hakeem Anwar. He's the CEO of Above Phone. He's put together a massive new report on digital IDs. He's been studying this perhaps more than anybody over the last number of years and has done incredible work on this. Hakeem, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Clayton. It's good to be here.
So they keep telling us we need to move to a digital ID, whether it's real ID. Maybe you could walk through maybe the different variations of these IDs that are popping up in Europe. And we know a lot of it was a test bed in Ukraine using the Dia app, and people were basically moving their full identities over to the phone. We've covered that here on the show extensively, which was really a product of USAID funneling money into Ukraine as a test bed operation. But maybe you could go through some of the different variations of this move to a digital ID around the world.
Yeah, so, over the past few months, I've been studying programs everywhere, and there's a difference in flavor of the programs in Asia versus the West, Europe, which try to be more democratic and progressive and interoperable. But at the end of the day, there are many different ways you can be enrolled onto this digital ID system. And a few of those, most digital ID programs encompass being able to log in to many government services. So this digital ID should make it easier to do things like paying taxes and getting social welfare, right? Things that everyone loves. And so because it's a single sign-on, that also means that it's interoperable. So it can be expanded to social media. And now in the UK and in the Australia with their Online Safety Act, this is like a natural next step to do age verification because, hey, the digital ID already has a way to, and it has your age saved on there. So this is kind of where it's going. It's first going to be just for government services, but it could quickly expand to the internet at large. And then it's also going to expand as a way companies can accept your information. I know Mexico has already made plans for this with their corp system, and as well as the EU, where all companies will be required to accept digital ID as a form of identification by 2027. So it slowly starts to grow until it encompasses everything that you can do on a daily basis.
Around the world. So for employment verification, they're telling us, of course, it's about our safety, right? It's to prevent whether illegal immigrants from getting jobs, and it's all about convenience. It's all about to make sure that someone's not hacking in your bank account. Like, this is your money. It's all tied to you. So it's all about protection, right? That's how they're telling us.
Yeah,
That this is going to
supposedly
unfold.
it's about our protection and safety and making our lives easier because the people who run these programs really care about that, right? Their whole argument is right now it's really hard to manage all these different IDs you have online. You've got to remember these usernames and passwords. And so to simplify it, to reduce the amount of paper, because we need to be carbon neutral for all these things, that's why digital IDs is very convenient. Well, it's also convenient for them too because they're able to pool information from many different areas together. A really good example of this is Brazil's blockchain called Cadastros that they've been working on, where the digital IDs, a key to those IDs, are actually saved on this blockchain. And then there's 6 other agencies, the tax agency, the housing agency, the marriage and life agency. These are also publishing their data onto this blockchain. So it's kind of all tied together. And that way, these different offices are aware of what's going on with each other. And so it ends up in this system where if you happen to do something wrong on one of these systems, like let's say you forget to pay your taxes, or you were sued, and now this will affect everything else, and it could potentially know your digital ID. When you look at what is happening in Russia and China, which you can kind of argue they have the most mature digital ID systems in the world. Right now in Russia, I mean, this is interesting. I don't think people really know about the level of surveillance and control in Russia. But if you get called for the draft and you're on Goslugi, which is their digital ID system, then they actually have cameras in the metro and on buses that can see who you are. And because you provided them your legal identity and your biometrics, they will actually stop you and say, hey, where are you going? We called you for the draft, after 20 days or so. So I want people to be aware of where this is going and the sneaky ways they might be asked to enter this digital ID system. And it happens when you tie your legal identity with your biometric. Right now, that happens kind of as a side party through banks. Banks will KYC you. Russia did the same thing where they ordered banks to do the face scanning for identity verification. And then they took the bank's biometric database and said, hey, now you have to provide that to us. There was two laws in 2012 and 2015, which did that. So, you kind of have to know the roadmap of how we're getting there.
Yeah, I can just think about, I mean, it's terrifying in a lot of ways. In the United States of America, I don't care about other countries. We have a right to privacy. We have a right to liberty. It's written in the preamble to our Declaration of Independence, right? We are endowed by our Creator with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have that liberty that's given to us by God in the United States. That's what we believe in this country. And by the way, you cannot just search our houses. You can't just come in and do whatever you want to us and have access to this information. We have a right to privacy, an expectation of privacy in the United States. And for instance, the IRS, they just rolled out a new system. I'm sure you're aware of it because we had to get enrolled to pay taxes. And they're now using this digital system where they require you to verify your biometrics with your phone.
Wow.
In order to pay your taxes. So we get the phone out and hold it up to your face, and you have to move your head around, just like you're setting up a new iPhone. So move your head around, do the whole thing, scans your face, takes pictures from, whatever, and then sends it off to the IRS. That seems to me maybe a second or third step in this process of them getting access to our biometrics for tracking purposes. What do you think about that?
I wasn't aware of that new onboarding, and that's really scary because we have unalienable rights in this country, and it's really sad to see them just sidestep it. But that's kind of a consequence over the past few years, and we've kind of removed the data silos from different agencies in the United States. So now that they can share data from each other with each other, and we have companies like Palantir that are more than happy to help, that this is really possible, that verifying your identity with one agency will give them the foundation to build a digital ID on. And I think it's important for people to realize, like, once you give your biometric identity with your legal identity, you tie them together, there's nothing else you need to do. From their side, they have the master key they need, and they can create a digital ID for you. It doesn't really matter if you use it or not. They just kind of have it sitting on the back end. So they've done this in Italy. They've done this in Denmark. And I know you don't pay that. Well, in other countries aren't as important as the US, but they will take those databases and use them. Now, in the United States, so you have to worry about the IRS, which I wasn't aware of. So thanks for bringing that to my attention. You also have to worry about Real ID, which Real ID technically isn't a digital ID. It's just a standard for physical ID cards. It's a ISO family of standards, 18013. And so Real ID is the first part of that family of standards, and it just makes it really hard to forge an ID card. Now, there is the fifth part of the standard, which is mobile driving licenses. And that's also what's being used at the airports right now. TSA accepts it. And so when you enroll in one of these, that is a digital ID. You have created a digital ID, just kind of distributed by Google or by Apple. They're kind of the authorities there. They can sign it, and then it can be verified at the airport by TSA. So I would tell people to avoid those at all costs. And also, another sneaky thing that's happening in the US is they are requiring renewals for this real ID. But what people don't realize in many states like Texas, Florida, Wyoming, and among others, now biometrics are a part of renewing your ID. And so you are essentially, again, combining your legal ID with your biometric identity, which is going to make it really easy down the line if Texas or Florida wanted to create their own app, which is how I think this will go down in the Western countries. It's not the federal government that does it. They say, all right, states' rights, you guys do whatever you want. They did this during COVID. We could probably see it again during the next breakdown, and they will make their own digital ID apps for people. So that's what people have to worry about right now.
So you see Real ID in the U.S. as sort of maybe a gateway drug in a lot of ways towards a full digital ID. And I know, like, I'm in Colorado. I know they have the digital ID for your Colorado driver's license. They have it in California. They have a few states. I don't know. All of the states have now rolled that out. And you can use right there at the TSA when you're going through to fly. You just tap the phone and you authorize that you're going to send your information to the TSA. Of course, they have a little disclaimer that says we're going to take your picture. We don't keep the picture. It's deleted immediately. But it's so instantaneous. It's really freaky. Even coming through passport control. We were just out of the country a few weeks ago. We came back through passport control, and I barely walked up to the little machine and stood there. And I don't even think I had to show my passport. I just walked up. Now that I think about it, I just walked up and it just scanned my face, and the guy was like, "You're good." I just walked right through. I'm like, "Well, what just happened? What just happened here? Like, you don't need to see my passport?" It was crazy.
That is insane. Yeah, and so these systems are live. The rules for entry exit biometrics for foreigners in the United States went live a few days ago. So now foreigners have to do it. I do think Americans have a choice. So I decline every time I fly. And they finally put signs up saying, hey, you can opt out. But coming back to the country, people need to be aware, hey, you can always opt out of it. We still have that constitutional right. I hope to God that doesn't change in the future. But if you're an American citizen, you can say, hey, I don't want the picture. And
the thing is, though, you get bullied. That's the thing. And again, they like look at you like, oh, you're going to make us do this extra work now because you're an American and you don't want your photo in a database. All right, come over here. We're going to take an extra 10 minutes just to make you feel bad because you want your liberties. Like, that's what they do.
They do bully you. It's actually incredible of wanting to file a complaint. So they always ask you for a reason, and I thought of a really good reason that is kind of funny. They ask you, hey, what's your reason for opting out? Well, you could just say, hey, I want you to keep your job because if this is just what's going to happen, we don't even need you here, right? One day it's just going to be AI. You can walk through. So I want to keep your job. No, but
I want you to have a job, you to be employed. Otherwise, it's going to be AI cameras and you'll be out of a job. So I want you to be a working American.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And we already know TSA is not getting paid right now, and they're very grumpy about it. And it's kind of interesting because on one hand, this system is well funded. It's very extensive. It's in every airport. And at the same time, during this government shutdown, you realize how brittle it is. There are many TSA agents that are just not showing up for work. So TSA around the country is on a skeleton crew, and there's delays and everything. And you just realize, like, wow, if we kind of pulled our energy back from the system a little bit, it would all fall apart without our consent. Here's one more thing I think is just a very useful tip, especially for people in those states where biometrics are just now a part of it. When these biometric programs get rolled out, it's not like one day they do it and it's everywhere. It's a lot of equipment. It takes a lot of time to go out to every office. But one tip I have for people is if you're in this position where you have to renew your ID and you go into your city and the DPS office they've got the scanning pictures, I say don't renew it there. Go farther out into the country if you have to renew your ID. And I wish I knew this a little bit earlier for some of my friends who had to, but like this is kind of what's going to have to happen. We go farther out in the country, go to smaller airports, smaller border checkpoints.
It's scary. And then, we have this report this week on all of these drones now being used in the United States for surveillance, police surveillance over American cities. And they're able to. That's where I'm curious about the biometric piece of this, because we see this happening in England. We see this like every corner you walk down in London. There's a camera. They're tracking everything. So now when they have this database, they know exactly they know all of your movements. They know what you're doing online. If you're having to sign in on the internet now. So maybe you can just talk about the surveillance piece of this, and then I want to ask you about like the internet usage. We'll get there in a second, but just like the drones, the biometric scanning, how pervasive is that, and how is it all tied together now?
Yeah, it's a good question. The short answer is it depends, and I know you've covered Palantir quite a bit, but I see this digital ID piece is being the control grid, because it has the precedent of your legal identity, and that's really, really important in order to find someone, in order to get someone in trouble, right? So it has that piece, and so I think any official government or public infrastructure at that point can be outfitted with biometric AI, so it can pull it and match it to a faceprint database and pull from any databases it has access to, and potentially, identify people at protests in a law enforcement setting. And yeah, I think this is right now a gray area in privacy law, where hey, you already provided this information at one other point, and there's data sharing from within the government, so it's one that you can't get around. But again, I kind of look at the examples in Russia and see that this is where it's going. So I think that people have a better chance if they don't hand over their legal identity. And I also think that we need to be really, really careful of what we're doing with our phones, because I think this could easily be systems and where, we enroll our face in Face ID, or now the new Windows 11, you're logging into your computer with your face, also easily that's able to be included in this digital ID system. So people need to be careful of all the different side channels.
Yeah, today I was going to the bank before you and I had a chance to talk, and I just was getting some cash. So I really try to get as much cash as I can on a regular basis and use cash, as our friend of the show, Catherine Austin Fitz, likes to point out. At least have like 60 days worth of cash. So anyway, but I was thinking about it. The banks are now, of course, removing more tellers. They want you. They want you to be online and digitally. They don't want you even really using cash anymore. And so I'm just curious on the banking piece of all of this. This is what I'm worried about from like a social credit score perspective, like we see in China. Hopefully it won't come to the United States, but we're watching what you're buying. We know that these transactions on Amazon or these digital things you've purchased, all of it is part of your avatar. It's part of your profile. And now we know everything about you, Palantir otherwise. We know everything about you. We know that you like to, on a Thursday, go to McDonald's or something, and we know that you often on a Thursday night go, drive through this particular toll booth and whatever it is. But it's all digital. It's all tied to this one ID. And what I worry about is from like insurance perspectives, people getting turned down for insurance. Hey, we see that you're eating too much McDonald's. Probably means you're close to cardiac arrest. That's where my brain goes with all of this. Can you talk about maybe the cash and the money side of this with the banks?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Clayton, because it's really the World Bank that is pushing this digital ID, digital public infrastructure initiative. So, in the States, we've got tax dollars to fund these programs, and so these programs are here. In poor countries like Africa, they don't even have money to document their populace. So the World Bank will give them billions of dollars. There's initiatives like the Identification for Development Initiative. There is 50 in 5, which so they target Africa, countries in Africa and South America, and they're pouring millions of dollars to ID their populace. And it's a bank. So, banks are going to be the natural first partners of this digital ID system. Here's a prediction I'll make. By 2027, it'll just be very natural. It'll be like the first means of authentication when you open a bank account. You won't necessarily, if you go in person, right, they're going to try and say, all right, hey, just sign up with your biometric biometrics. That's the way we do it now. And I think it's going to come down to the individual bank and their policies. Just know that if you're doing something like this online, you can do things like try and disable your webcam. Like, don't give your webcam permission, and it's going to ask you like multiple times. Oh, hey, oh, okay, that didn't work again. Can we try again? And then eventually it'll give up and say, okay, we can't get your webcam to work. Send us your identification documents, a scan. So it's like, they're not going to tell you there's a manual way to do it. You're going to have to insist. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. But as you correctly pointed out, like banks will be the financial system is really, really important right now. With bank transfers and credit card payments, it's possible that those are easily integrated into the digital ID system. But what's more likely is the use of payment apps. Those are a little bit more easy because they use modern infrastructure. And this is the second component of digital public infrastructure, which is like an idea from the United Nations Development Program, which is called unified payments. So you need the digital ID to tie everything together. Then you have the unified payments. And in India, these unified payment systems are really well done, and they're used everywhere. So you'll have payment apps that you start to use. You'll kind of see this over the next 2 years. These become popular. So PayPal might pick up the torch, or Zelle or Venmo, and they're going to encourage they're going to make these apps really easy to use. So when we get to that stage, I think that we'll get into that situation where, okay, log into Zelle. All right, hey, I'm switching over to your digital ID verification. Okay, we got that. And then I think we're getting into that point you're talking about where they're able to track all of your behavior and activity.
Well, we've seen them debank individuals already. Friends of mine have been debanked. I've had journalist friends who sat in my living room, and while they were sitting there in my living room doing an interview with me, he got an alert that he was debanked off of one of the websites, was Zelle or one of them, where he was where he could make a little bit of money. He was making no money to begin with, and they shut off his funding source because they didn't like his politics as a reporter covering the Ukraine war. Like, that's what I worry about, being debanked, being taken out of the system. And there was an ad that ran recently. It was like an AI generated ad that ran recently in the UK about the Brit card. I'm sure you've seen it online, and we can even show a little clip of it here. But it shows an old lady waiting for a bus, and she doesn't have a phone. She doesn't have a smartphone, and therefore she doesn't have a Brit card with her digital ID. And the bus driver tells her, sorry, you can't get on the bus. We need your Brit card. And she says, I don't even have a smartphone.
Can I see your Brit card, please?
I don't have one. I don't have a smartphone.
That's what I'm worried about too, is, if you don't go along with this, you're going to be left behind. You're going to be what liberals love to say about the poor and minorities in this country, is that they don't have access to bank accounts. They don't have IDs, therefore it's difficult. We can't have like some sort of an ID verification for voting, right? So that's what they say, right? They're going to be left behind. Yep. They're not going to be able to vote in our elections, and I worry that that's what's coming with this new system.
Yeah, that type of messaging in that ad is exactly the messaging that comes from, these initiatives from the World Bank and the United Nations. That's how they frame it. Like, having a right to an identity is a human right, because otherwise you wouldn't get all these awesome things like school and social support and public transportation. But they conveniently ignore the fact that in this situation, they have to be the ones to control the ID, and they're also the ones pushing people out of the system. They could just ease up a little bit and let people identify themselves in other ways. But no, that's never part of the discussion. And so it's all about power, and it's about control. And I think that they would like this digital control grid because there are so many people. It's really hard to keep track of what they're doing, and also to make sure everyone is on their best behavior. So a unified digital public infrastructure will make that a lot easier. Now, this is really interesting. So in China, they have the system pretty much worked out. Even though I'd say their digital ID is fairly new, but they do have places where they have a public registry of what do they call it? They call it dishonorable citizens. And so if you get sued, if someone sues you for defamation, and this is an actual story, this guy got sued because he was a lawyer defending someone, and so he got sued for defamation, and he wrote an apology to the judge. And the apology was not convincing enough. So they put his name on the blacklist. Next things he knows, he can't buy he can't buy plane tickets online. Right.
What?
So yeah, it's really insane the hoops people have to jump in
So
through
you
there.
can
And
even
what-
like look at this dishonorable registry and see who's like listed on this blacklist.
It's public. Yeah, it's public. I have the link in the digital ID report. Blew my mind when I first saw it, and so yeah, like people would stop talking to this dude, right? Because of like the fear of being associated to this guy. They don't want to end up on the list either, right? So it's the chilling effect, and to bring it home here, I think, Clayton, the best thing people can do right now is go out and start talking about this issue in person. Farmers markets, the people that are close to people who run businesses, and just say, hey, this stuff is coming. I don't know if we can stop it, but I just want to say, whatever happens, I'm not going to let a digital ID get between me and you right here. This relationship, I've got your back. I don't really want any part in this system. And I think that if you do that with the 40, 50, 100 people in your network, that pool of data, that human, data is not the right word, that human connection, that human energy is way more valuable than any digital ID system.
Oh, I agree with you. I hope in America we can stand against this. The thing is, they won't tell us we have a social credit score. They won't tell us that we're in a dishonorable database. We'll have to find out years later through FOIA requests and other things that some organization in the government with political motives, like we saw under the Biden administration, was targeting conservative groups and going after them. But we only learned that through lawsuits and actually classified documents being released. So that's what I worry about. At least in China, they're telling you with a database that it's public. Here's what we're doing. Like, we're a communist country. Like, this is what we do. Not in America. And that's really deeply disturbing to me. This full report that you've just done is on. We'll have it linked up in the description below, but it's Above Phone, ABOVE, abovephone.com/digital.
Yes. Abovephone.com/digital. You can download the whole 33-page report. There's also an executive summary with it. And yes, a lot of the stuff we talked about today, I mean, if you're international, it's got information about different countries there and what their programs are doing, the status of the digital ID system, the timing of it, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it. So there are some solutions at the end of the report of alternative finance, and just how to navigate your life when digital ID begins to become more pervasive. So check that out, abovephone.com/digital.
Awesome. And before I let you go, I mean, I didn't know much about Above Phone, and that's not why you're even on the show, is to talk about that, but you're the CEO of that company. And from what I understand, just like diving into a little bit of the research on Above Phone, Linux, am I right? Linux based. So
Yeah.
It's a privacy phone, privacy laptops, privacy tablets. How does that work? Like, if I wanted to say, I'm done with this. I want to separate myself from this tyranny. I want the privacy that I'm afforded under the United States Constitution. What does Above Phone do exactly?
Yeah, our mission is to make sure people are protected from these abusive software ecosystems. So most people don't realize it, but their devices are pre-hacked, right? If someone, a third party was out there and they could install apps on your phone without your knowledge and change settings and turn on Bluetooth, I would consider that hacked. But the truth is that we are all using phones like that. When you're using a big tech phone or using a big tech laptop, you don't have a choice in the updates. They turn on things like AI photo scanning of your messages by default, and they don't even notify you. They don't ask you for your consent. So it's a really dangerous situation because of all the things we've talked about, the digital ID system. I mean, it's not out of the question for a digital ID app to appear on your phone one day without you doing a thing. Like that's not out of the question. So what our company does is we've been around since 2021 and we've been providing solutions because there are solutions. There is a way you can use a phone without being connected to big tech. So our phone uses open source operating systems, and it also is one of the most secure phones that you can buy on the market. Like it's been it's basically been proven the companies that try to break into these phones cannot break into this one, whereas iPhones, Androids, they typically have ways to break through the encryption. And so we do the phones. We also do laptops, which run Linux and open source operating systems. And the beautiful part is you can still do everything you would normally would on a phone, just you have way more control. You can put your apps in separate locations away from maybe your personal life. You can have control over your permissions. Instead of giving your whole contact book away, you can pick a few separate people. So yeah, that's our mission, to make sure people like yourself who do important work are protected with their communications.
Great. Well, I'm going to check it out as well. Hakeem, great to meet you. Thank you for being here on the show. And I really wanted to dive more deeply into this digital ID. I think it's important for everyone to know what's coming. And in many ways, you're a futurist because you're in this world watching it happen. You're seeing what's happening in India, these things that are going to start to flow here 2 years from now, the things that we've been seeing in Ukraine, they desperately want to bring to the United States. Hakeem, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Clayton. And thanks for watching.